No, they said destroy Nazi tyranny. That's the specific wording, destroy Nazi tyranny. No, they don't mention anything about Italy. Okay. August 15th, 1941. This week, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill meets American President Franklin Roosevelt in Canada to hammer out a few things. Do you suppose it will have any repercussions? I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, German Army Group Center finally eliminated the Smolensk pocket and took over 300,000 prisoners. They have also surrounded 2 Red Armies in Ukraine and are preparing for a big push on Leningrad. The Japanese resumed their bombing campaign in China and made no headway with the US in getting Japanese assets unfrozen. Here's what follows. From the 9th through the 12th, Churchill and Roosevelt meet at Placentia Bay in Newfoundland with their military staffs. They agree to send strong warnings to the Japanese and that there is the understanding that the US will almost certainly join the war if Japan attacks British or Dutch possessions in Malaya or the East Indies. They also send a message to Joseph Stalin proposing a Moscow meeting so that they can make formal arrangements for sending supplies to the USSR. The Atlantic Charter is the result of these meetings and is a statement of principles of British and American policy. Things like that countries should have the right to hold free and fair elections. It sets out reasons why the US might go to war and what the aims of such war making would be. Point number 6, though, says that after destroying Nazi tyranny, specifically Nazi tyranny, they then could create a lasting peace. This, according to David Stahl, influences Hitler's direction of the war, since if Britain, and perhaps one day the United States, will not accept limited war aims and would end Nazi rule, then Germany's lack of resources would be ruinous in a long war, and economic objectives in the Soviet Union must now assume a far greater importance than before. You can argue what influence this meeting had on Hitler in the comments, but on the 12th, Hitler issues a supplement to his Directive 34 from July 30th, 34A. This supplement has several provisions. Army Group South is to gain a foothold east of the Dnieper, prevent the enemy from regrouping behind the river, occupy the Crimea, and occupy the Donetsk region and the Kharkov industrial area. Up in Army Group Center, the most important task here is to eliminate the enemy flanking positions, projecting deeply to the west, with which he is holding down large forces of infantry on both flanks of Army Group Center. This will require close cooperation between Army Group Center and South to cut off and then destroy the Soviet Fifth Army. The left flank of Army Group Center will be moved northward as far as needed to relieve Army Group North's right flank and allow it to transfer more divisions to attack Leningrad. Only after these threats to our flanks have been entirely overcome and armored formations have been rehabilitated will it be possible to continue the offensive on a wide front and with echeloning of both flanks against the strong enemy forces which have been concentrated for the defense of Moscow. The object of operations must then be to deprive the enemy before the coming winter of his government, armament, and traffic center around Moscow, and thus prevent the rebuilding of his defeated forces and the orderly working of government control. Before the beginning of this attack on Moscow, operations against Leningrad must be concluded, and the aircraft from 2nd Air Fleet, which are at present attached to 1st Air Fleet, must again be available to 2nd Air Fleet. In the northeast, he doesn't say much except that the current attack should encircle Leningrad and allow a link with the Finns. Stiff resistance there over the next few days, though, impels him to demand that Hermann Hoth's tanks head north to help Wilhelm von Leeb's flank. Thing is, we've seen that much of German high command does not want to divert from Moscow and has been scheming to avoid doing so. When the whole chain of command, Brauchitsch, Halder, and Heusinger at OKW, Bach at Army Group Center, Guderian as Bach's principal field commander, demonstrated that it was continuing to prevaricate, Hitler, who had recovered his sense of how the campaign was unfolding, lost patience. He repeated his orders and dictates a letter to Army Commander Walter von Brauchitsch, This actually gives Brauchitsch a mild heart attack, a real actual heart attack. Now, OKH Chief of Staff Franz Halder, who suggests that Brauchitsch resign when the letter arrives, himself then resigns to stave off an act of folly. Hitler refuses his resignation. Halder writes, "History will level at us the gravest accusation that can be made of a high command, namely, that for fear of undue risk, we did not exploit the attacking impetus of our troops." Army Group Center Commander Fedor von Bock writes in his diary, "I don't want to capture Moscow. I want to destroy the enemy's army, and the bulk of that army is in front of me." There is, however, intense pressure from the Soviets all week at Yelnya and the regions both to its north and its south. And Army Group Center is playing some heavy defense. I'll talk more about this over the next few weeks. As to what's going on further north, I said last week that there is to be a renewed offensive by Army Group North against Leningrad and explained the basic plan. Of course, the Soviets expect a renewed offensive, and so Stavka orders Klim Voroshilov and Nikolai Vatutin to make another counterattack, as they had weeks ago, to destroy the Germans in the Soltsi, Staraya Russa, and Dno sectors. Vatutin's plan is for the 11th, 27th, 34th, and 48th Red Armies to attack the German 16th Army 10th Corps, which has been in an exposed position at Staraya Russa. The 48th will attack west of Lake Ilmen towards Utorgosh, and the other three south of the lake to cut off the Germans and take Soltsi, Dno, and Cholm, which would break up the whole German advance on Leningrad, right? Well, this Red Army attack begins on the 12th. But the Germans preempt it by sending the 16th Army and the 10th Army Corps towards Novgorod and east of Staraya Russa already the 10th. This sabotages the impending attacks by the 48th and 11th Red Armies. The Germans stop the 27th Army around Cholm, but the 34th advances a full 40 kilometers and reaches the Dno-Staraya Russa Railway the 14th. They do manage to surround the 10th Army Corps, the objective, and threaten the rear of the panzers advancing on Novgorod, but on the 14th and 15th, Lieb sends in two motorized divisions, the 56th Motorized Corps, and air support to assist the 10th. So the week ends with the Soviet attacks failing, though Finnish attacks this week south of Lake Ladoga reach Vuosalmi. The Germans in Army Group North are anything but optimistic, though. Erich Hübner, commanding Panzer Group 4, writes to his wife the 15th, "As a result of the overall supply situation and the cold, the campaign must be ended by the end of September." As for Germany's Army Group South, this week, the Soviet 6th and 12th Armies, who have been surrounded in the south by Ewald von Kleist and have failed to break out, are finally defeated. Here are some numbers of that, courtesy of David Glantz. Of the 129,000 men the Soviets had on July 20th, some 11,000 make it out of the encirclement, mostly rear service units. The Germans record the capture of 107,000 soldiers, including Generals Pavel Ponedelin and Ivan Muzichenko, 4 corps commanders, 11 divisional commanders, 286 tanks, and 953 big guns. A further 2 corps commanders and 6 divisional commanders died in the fighting. Walter von Reichenau's forces reached the outskirts of Kiev late last week, but were driven back. They now played defense until on the 12th, Andrei Vlasov counterattacks and restores most of the area's forward defenses. That day, Hitler orders Army Group South to halt the offensive on Kiev. As soon as ammunition resupply permits, the city must be destroyed by air bombardment. So Reichenau will turn his forces against M.I. Potapov's 5th Army, which threatens Army Group Center's right flank. Also in the south, from the 14th to the 17th, the Soviets evacuate the Black Sea Nikolaev naval base. 8 destroyers from the Black Sea Fleet cover the evacuation. There are a bunch of ships at the base under construction. 13 of them are advanced enough to be towed away, but 1 battleship and 10 other ships on the stocks are blown up. I'd like to say a word today about a front that's been pretty quiet lately, the North African front. Since last summer, Churchill has been more and more concerned by what seems to him the unreasonable difference between the number of troops Britain has in the North African theater and the number of fighting formations and aircraft that can actually operate at any one time. He repeatedly pestered Archie Wavell, formerly in command of the theater, about this, and Wavell said that because of the climate, no army can operate in the desert without massive administrative support. Well, Wavell has been out as commander for nearly 2 months, and Claude Auchinleck in, and Churchill is already asking him when the next offensive is going to be. Auchinleck says that until they consolidated in Syria and Iraq, there ain't gonna be one. This is not going to stop Churchill and co. from pressing for one, and they have a few theoretically sound arguments. Pressing Germany on another front would maybe offer some relief to the Soviets if the Germans diverted any resources south. A big Allied success in Africa would maybe encourage Turkey and the US to their side and discourage Spain from joining the Axis. And if they can retake Cyrenaica, then the RAF can protect the fleet better and bring relief to Malta. And since there's no enemy attack looking very likely in Africa, at least the next few months, a summer attack could both have assistance from the men under siege at Tobruk and break the siege. And once the summer is over, Britain might be under invasion threat again, and then Auchinleck won't get any more reinforcements. The enemy in North Africa has nearly 400 tanks all told, and both German and Italian infantry. So Auchinleck is going to need at least 2 and hopefully 3 armored divisions of his own. I mean, he does currently have more than 500 tanks, but half of them are Matilda 1s, and they've had serious issues against the Axis and in the desert in general. He will be re-equipping and readapting his forces over the summer, so we'll see more of his plans and how it goes between he and his government in a few weeks. Other than all his Matilda tanks, his mobile armored force is the 7th Armored Brigade of the 7th Armored Division, mainly equipped with Crusaders, and the 4th Armored Brigade Group, but they are planning to convert from Matildas to American Stuart tanks. He does not think they'll even be brought up to strength until maybe the end of September, but this doesn't even consider the time for adapting the Stuarts to the desert and training the men. So the earliest he thinks they'd even be ready for battle in any case would be mid-October. He also tells London that just maintaining an armored force in the desert is so difficult that he needs a reserve force of at least 50% of his tank force before he'd think of making any attack at all. And that will bring us to the end of the week, a major meeting in Newfoundland that lays out some thoughts and plans. Hitler changing his thoughts and plans, even as there is still action on all of his eastern fronts. I think I'll end today with a quote from David Stahill about the situation at the beginning of this week. According to most accounts, by the end of the first week in August, each of the 3 German army groups stood apparently victorious over their opposing Soviet fronts while plans were afoot for further advances. What is insufficiently recognized is that operating in such vast areas, overextension was inevitable, forcing local commanders to disperse their strength and making it more and more difficult to achieve concentration for the next offensive. With the Soviet line still being doggedly held everywhere, increasing sections of the German front passed over to defensive warfare. Only in the earliest weeks of the campaign did all 3 German army groups advance simultaneously, and thereafter, resource depletion brought combined forward operations to a halt. This heightened the importance of the strategic dispute between Hitler and Halder, as Germany's shrinking offensive strength had now to be used for a final decisive blow. But can they reach consensus? Can they agree? And where will the decisive blow fall? And when will it fall? What shall be the fate of Europe? All the world is watching! If you want to ignore the space-time continuum and jump ahead and see Soviet forces smashing through the German lines, you can watch the episode about the Kursk offensive and the song Panzerkampf that I made for the Sabaton History channel right here. Our Time Ghost Army member of the week is Witten Dini. It is only thanks to the Time Ghost Army that we have the resources to continue our orderly advance through the years of the Second World War. So join the army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. See you next time.